Yo, we're going to try something a bit more extended or expanded. And it's going a bit deeper into the concept or practical concept to just take away one's identity, just to detach from the mind and the body in regards to that. So, kind of try to make it a step by step process to just make it easier to understand how it works and why, especially that with a brain that's been living through this as the mind, just the mind thinking it's you, or you thinking you're the mind, whatever the case is, that repetition over time kind of makes it normal. Yet, upon understanding the various steps to breaking down the identity, you see how limited that puts you indirectly through the whole indoctrination that we've got, and how much more expanded and vast and potentially unlimited that you are. Yet the tricky part is being able to rationalize this with the brain that thinks and feels it's got the controller. And it's a bit of a tussle at first, but you always kind of find different ways, different methods, different techniques, different metaphors and analogies for it to resonate in your brain, for it to kind of go, oh, right, I never really held the controller, I'm just a hard drive. And from that point on, you slowly getting disidentified with it and everything that it contains. You kind of just step away from the hard drive and realize that you're much more vast and expanded. So let's give this a shot and not blast through, because there are consequences to blasting through that process or just immediately jumping to the end point. At times it's not properly understood, so it kind of puts you in this weird zone where you're the soul, but you don't know the technicalities behind it. And at times it kind of causes an imbalance in the reaction towards everyone else, because it's like, I'm the soul, I don't care about the identity, and you just spouting that off, and it's like, whoa, wait, you got to balance this. There's also understanding the exterior is still trapped in the old indoctrination as well, so you can't just fire it all off, which does happen on certain people. Do have that experience. Oftentimes it is told that when you take LSD or that kind of stuff, or ayahuasca, unprepared and unsupervised, that kind of stuff happens. You just break through the identity way too fast to consciously understand everything that you're experiencing. It's kind of like why they say Kundalini yoga can be dangerous for certain people, because once you reach that state, and that your DMT, just your natural DMT, kind of drops in the blood cell after doing those breathing exercise, well, there's always a percentage of chance that the mind is going to just fuck with this aspect of separation from the identity and kind of notice the experience as a scary one instead of a freeing one. So that's why it's much better to kind of take this process step per step and do it at your own rhythm. Don't just jump out of it. It's tricky. Or you can, hey, if you do jump out of it, just basically take a couple of steps back and look back, and always have this interesting back and forth, because you can't just ignore the mind. You can't just step out of it and chuck it out. It's more of a game of you noticing the difference, but then retooling the mind to be much more in coherence with who the kind of like unlimited nature that who you really are. So you're making the mind ascend to that point naturally and normal, per time, because there's multiple layers to this. Anyhow, let's get to it. So, easiest trick, the first start, okay? The beginning of it all, easiest trick to just step out of the identity is realizing that once you were born, that hard drive of a brain, zero. It had nothing, okay? And this is crucial to just hone in on, because you get back to that state when you were a kid, prior to the schooling, prior to the learning, okay? When you didn't have any of those folders, in your hard drive, anything about the environment, the language, the social standing, any of that, okay? Because all of that was indoctrinated later on. You didn't come on this earth with that, okay? And that could change at any point based on if you were born in a different country or in a different time period. So understand how granular that thing is, how free flowing that is, and how non attached to you it is, because you didn't come here with that. Your state was much more in an aspect of discovery, wonder, playfulness, creativity, and later on, with the whole social habits, your parents, dropping some of those folders, the environment dropping some more of those folders, having to play the social game, quote unquote, with school and all that, then you started getting those folders, which kind of shape your kind of personality. But that's still referring back to the hard drive. And remembering that you were not the hard drive. So whatever personality that it formed, based on the things that you learned afterward, it's still not you. It still ain't you, And I might as well introduce this concept early on before it gets a bit too tricky. But the second thing that you kind of want to get down with, aside from the hard drive not necessarily being what it was, you not having the hard drive when you just came here, so not necessarily being attached to it, is non-duality. Everything is and isn't at the same time through various kind of degrees and nuances that you'll want to look into. So to be blunt, the way we kind of notice storytelling, scripting, the way kind of school indoctrinates us is this aspect that there's one way, one lesson, one method, one way to learn, one pattern to get a specific thing, and that's off. What's being told was what other people experienced as a pattern, which worked for them through their intuition and their subsequent synchronicities up to what they've done. But it does not mean that it is the only way or only pattern to go towards. If we're going to use as an example your desire, you want to do something, or you want to get a specific job, or you want to do a specific task or work. Well, you can refer back to what some have done, but you can't keep it as the one way, one method, one and done type of deal. Again, it is and it isn't. It is for the person, but it isn't for a large amount of people that would, let's say, either think or work a different way. So it doesn't necessarily mean that that method or that way of thinking is the one and done. Yet at the same time, you can still use it as a, let's say, ingredient in your own personal soup of creativity, which you want to do as a specific work or a specific type of activity. You always have a massive amount of ingredient to the degree that you pay attention to them or note them down or remain open to them to use. So it's not just one method. You'll basically combine multiple little methods as well as your own approach. So that one method that was initially told does work and doesn't necessarily, but it's looking that it does work for a specific type of person or just that one person, and doesn't necessarily work with the attitude types or, let's say, flow type, feeling type of certain people. Now you want to get into that habit of doing this for multiple subjects and a lot of things that you kind of encounter through life, because that's where the nuances kind of play. And especially if you have that internal connection with the heart and you're kind of able to spot that feeling of separation, which is the third thing to kind of anchor yourself and honor yourself with, or help yourself separate from the identity. That feeling, understanding that feeling of separation to a deeper core. So I know I'm opening a lot of pockets and bubbles, because there already went from number 2 to number 3, and I want to go through some more of number 2, in the aspect of you can be the mind and not be the mind at the same time. You can understand that you are and are not at the same time. Are not meaning your true self, the soul, is not that hard drive. But at the same time, you do have you are, on a technicality, this mind and body. It's understanding the various ways that you don't necessarily want to keep yourself locked in to the mind and body. in, again, specific aspects like this, the glasses, or whatever little stereotypes might pop up in the head that the mind would immediately latch onto. You're not that. So you don't necessarily get associated to that, but you still use it. So you kind of see how non-duality can kind of literally help you understand this further and further, which it does drag on the conversation a longer time. But welcome to fine-tuning, where you kind of notice where staying basic didn't necessarily help and brought a lot of issues over time. You know, it'll be easier to understand later on if I just straight up jump into number 3, which was after non-duality, you literally have this aspect of, see, this is where opening multiple thoughts ideas gets to be a bit tricky, but that's another thing to keep track. So non-duality being your best friend, the emotional, the feeling of separation, being a bit more of a master at understanding it. So when you scale it down to the basic, okay, to really keeping it really fine-tuned basic for your mind, there's 2 basic emotions that you can keep track. There's the amount of pushing it to the max, but awesome joy. You know, there's everything in the range of joy. So ecstasy, amazement, how do you say it? Like, I wouldn't add all the characteristic, beautiful creation, just fun, bliss, wonder. Like, you just get into that state, that flow state, appreciation, you know, playfulness. Like, it's all part of that same range, okay? And then there's the other one, which is the feeling of separation. Whenever you hate, you fear, you loathe, you criticize, you judge, you despise, you know, you kind of feel off about certain things. Then that second feeling of separation and the variations that kind of go through it are here to warn you. Because ultimately, as you're not simply the mind and the brain, but your true self is the soul, you get to a point of understanding through playing with that, you know, recognizing that feeling of separation, that whenever it would pop up, it's literally telling you you are from within attacking yourself through, how you say, when you judge someone and you judge yourself, it's still the same feeling, just a different variation. So there's no you being separate from the other in that sense. Feeling wise, it'll feel like the same thing. Also because it comes from within the same projector / the mind / the filter that goes in. So what you begin to do and play with is understanding how is the mind perceiving this event or perceiving this person, making a judgment on that, which then brings that feeling of separation. And at that point you understand, okay, what's going on? Okay, made a bit of a judgment on this person. Okay, why was it made? Oh, some habit from the hard drive, or just casual indoctrination through television. You know, when you see a lot of characters doing it, speech pattern, it just feels normal after a while. But it ain't. Why? Because as you do it onto others, you do it back to yourself. It comes from the same mind. It comes from the same projector. It's kind of hurting itself in that very same way as well. You are not separate from the other because you are perceiving it. You, in the mind, is perceiving it in the other, thus criticizing oneself in that same way. The perception comes from within, so you see it in the other, thus you hurt yourself. You know, that's why it becomes a bit of an irony right there. And this is where this game of fine-tuning, you know, tune-up, or just you kind of get yourself to that expert level. You're not doing this out of a need, and it has to be clear. You're not doing it because you need it. You do it because it's much more, it's natural. It's a game. You love kind of fine-tuning yourself in that way and understanding the little intricacies that kind of come in. Because after a while, when you understand how natural it is, especially once you play with that feeling of separation and you understand, oh right, if I criticize someone else, or if I think shit about myself, or if there's, let's say, a casual habit of thought on a specific subject that brings that, then you're able to spot it, understand where it came from, and then switch it. Use it as a bounce pad. You don't focus too much on it. You literally use it as a bounce pad. Getting that the feeling, as soon as you get that warning from the feeling of separation, this bounce pad. Because I think that would be number 4. Understanding the observer effect in the aspect of quantum physics, but also in the aspect of your brain literally being kind of like a hard drive. So whatever you focus on will imprint on your brain. Even if it's the subtle things, the subtle habits of talking and discussing, television, radio, movies, all of that, it'll subtly imprint on your brain, on your subconscious. News, all of that. Staying in circles, friend circles that would just go into drama, you're still feeling it. It's still imprinting on your brain. It's normalized. It's casualized because it's been repeated often. It's like, oh, it's in my environment and people around are talking like that, so that's normal. But this is where it becomes like softly shooting yourself in the foot without knowing. Upon you understanding the repeated and normalized feeling of separation and, let's say, habits that would bring that, normalize it, make it seem like really normal to casually trash talk or casually judge. That became really normal for certain people, and the biggest irony is you can see it in church. Cool, the 1 hour mess is over, but then, I say mess, it's the French term for ceremony. So that's what they called it, messes. But that's over, but then the judgment comes after. Or, oh hey, we're going to preach unity on one end, but except with some exceptions. That becomes normal, casualized, and at times certain people in that kind of indoctrinations do not see it because it becomes a blinder. So this is where you can't judge them, because the feeling of separation literally whams you back. Well, okay, consciousness literally pokes you at that one with the feeling of separation, and you a triple whammy that kind of happened before we jumped on the aspect of repetition. A bit more on the aspect of separation. Well, at one point, as an experiment, I was just clearing certain things off and using the springboard technique because it was much faster. And again, I'll explain a bit further in the 4th point. But at one point, there we go. I wasn't really fond of myself on camera. And eventually I started asking, okay, why? And I remembered certain memories of my parents really being, one of the two parents, loving to keep memories, but whenever you would watch tapes of family events and such, it would always be like a bit of a soft criticizing fest. It's like, you danced a bit too much, people thought you were like that. Soft and small criticizing fest early on, like 4 to 5, around that time. I think we stopped watching those tapes at around 6 or 7, or I got sick and tired of it. But those were things that used to happen early on. So after that, and you have your very own parent criticizing you from time to time on those own tapes, you don't necessarily want to see yourself on tape. So upon catching that memory, immediately the mind kind of went, those motherfuckers. And then it's like, wait a minute. Just pausing that. Instead of letting the mind automatically bounce off to an opposite, just going, well, wait. One, you gotta give that aspect of forgiveness. Why? Because they didn't know what they didn't fucking know. And 2, this comes in as a very interesting thing that kind of happened, which led to that triple whammy. 2, you got to take responsibility for it. And it's like, this is where non-duality becomes your best friend, because you are responsible and you are not. During that moment, I still being in the mind, I kind of went, what the fuck would I take responsibility for that? Well, you can take responsibility for the hatred that was kind of spout off after that. Not responsibility for the event, but Take responsibility for the hate that was spout off after that. And it's like, well, I didn't fucking know what I didn't fucking know. Oh, just like them. And right then and there, like, consciousness just gave me that whammy and going, right. And I couldn't say a thing because it's like, well, the mind couldn't say a thing, couldn't retort that much because it's like, all right, that same forgiveness, that I give myself, I got to give to them as well. Yep. And you can take responsibility for what was dished out afterward, fully understanding that you didn't know what you didn't know. Same goes for them. And it's like, that's how it kind of became a bit of a triple whammy. And another thing that it helped me understand is that always stretch a context to the particular event, as if you're stretching the timeline to have and understand the events that created the momentum of thoughts and ideas and beliefs that led to the action that led to the event. Always do that. Always, always, always. Because you'll understand your own much more clearly, and you'll also understand that you'll never know the granularity of it when it comes to others, because you'll never live as them. Understanding it for yourself, what led to certain thoughts, what led to certain action, especially a lot of things that you didn't necessarily choose, literally puts you in this state of, you're able to kind of pick an event, stretch it time-wise to understand a bit more about the context, and just let it go for both yourself and whoever was part of that event. And you're able to let go of whatever outside event never led you to a context of thought leading to action. Because you understand you're not learning from that, and to make brash judgment based on that lack of information is like the ultimate shot in the foot, because it becomes a habit and you easily point it back towards yourself, which again keeps you in that stuck aspect of the mind as well. It only sees in, let's say, linear time, but it doesn't necessarily look at I don't necessarily know how to explain that concept, but you're as, let's say, the soul, and when you kind of start tapping into that kind of thinking from that perspective and point of view, not necessarily limited by the mind, who often overthinks or over analyze based on the past, always the past. You know, even something that you hear from a minute ago is the past. So this ain't a future, this ain't a present thing. It's just taking its ingredient of to create a future or whatever you want to create from the past. But you, upon understanding that, can make multiple combinations of what was, but you're not stuck to what was. You understand the limitation of the mind, so you detach from it. So it's a bit of this is where you kind of see some of the complexity, but that eventually becomes much more simplistic afterward. It's just like the initial indoctrination, you have to repeat the complexity a certain amount of time to make it simple. But don't necessarily let the mind go to an extreme and say, oh, this is going to be difficult, this is tough. Again, if this happens, use that feeling of separation, because you're going to feel it. If it's something that's judging you or another, you know, saying that, oh, fuck, I can't do it, oh, fuck, I'm late, feeling of separation. So use it as a bounce pad and immediately beeline, so immediately go for the emotion of that end result. Use those cheat code questions, literally saying, okay, well, that's the mind. It's basically basing itself off the past, saying, oh, I haven't done it before, so I can't do it, blah, blah, blah. No, that's the mind. You push it to the side. That's cool. That's your limitation. How would it feel if I already had that completed? Or what would be a variation of that feeling? Or what would be the starting feeling of that change? And with that question, instead of going with the immediate quote that the mind placed, oh, it's not doable, blah, 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 blah. Well, with that question, you already start a chain reaction, feeling-wise, because you're beelining to that end feeling. You're not trying to do process 1, process 2, process 3. No, you're like, okay, that end point, what's the feeling? How would it feel? You literally challenge the mind. Okay? And this is where you start looking at the indoctrination aspect of things face to face. Because if it tells you, oh, if you don't have it now, then you'll never have it again, that's an indoctrination. Oh, if you don't have it now, you're going to need to follow step 1, 2, 3, the 10-step process to get that feeling. That's indoctrination. Because you can just ask yourself, okay, how would it feel? And you're going to get beeline to that. It's the same technique I explained with the craft. That's why it all kind of merges together. Whether you do a drawing or you do a sculpture or whatever craft that you do, even acting, you hone in on that end result. You hone in on that final product, feeling, emotionally. And then you play around. You play with the concept. You're already at that end point. You just play with it. You don't need it to be exactly like that. Or you even challenge the mind going, okay, but what reference point are you putting? Because you're making me feel that feeling of separation, saying I don't have it. But what are you referring to on? What goal feeling are you referring to, instead of literally making me feel bad without telling me what's the objective that you're comparing me to? See, you look at that little indoctrination, just that small little habit, okay? Wiping that out can make miracles in your life. Because you're no longer subconsciously blocked by it. It's no longer becoming a casual thing of being like, okay, well, that feeling's there, so I'm not going to be able to achieve it. No. You block it, you stop it, and you counter it by literally going for the endpoint feeling, using it as a springboard. And then this becomes a fucking top-notch game for you, you know? You start peeling off more layers of that identity. Another thing that can happen is saying, oh, I can't do that because I'm this, or I can't do that because I live here, oh, I can't do that because I don't have money. Indoctrination, again, beeline to that end feeling. Like, I saw a post from an artist on Tumblr, and I kind of wanted, it got me into the mind for that 2 seconds, and then going, thank you. I needed to face that in order to realize I could still react upon small posts. But the post was basically, okay, there's first image, there's me actually doing the work that I do, and there's me being the second image, there's me being a lazy artist, thinking about the television, how cool my characters would be on television, how cool they would be animated. You know, and it's like, you're calling yourself lazy, you're beelining to the endpoint goal that you'll be able to create, mold, and mesh and merge, you know? At first I'm like, what the fuck? But then it's like, right, in this indoctrinated aspect of depression, you can easily, you know, you start noticing it. People just loving to have self-deprecating humor, yet not noticing that the more you repeat that, the more you affect your subconscious, the more you normalize shitting on yourself, and then you're depressed afterward, because it's like, oh, well, I'm all this negative and bad thing. Fuck. And it was you know, even if it was a joke at first, you ran with it and hurt yourself afterwards. So, you know, playfulness. You detach from that identity, you know? What else? I know I had a fourth point, and you see where it kind of goes in and out of it all. There's multiple aspects of the identity that you can shed, and non-duality being your best friend just is a big one, especially in the example that I brought on. Use that technique when you're listening to this kind of stuff, or to these stories, or to these analysis. Close your eyes and visualize how, in a prior scenario that you faced, how you can apply it onto yourself. And I tell you, because you're closing your eyes, okay, your attention is much more on the story that is being told with the voice, okay? Because you're not distracted by anything else, or my movements at all, or anything on video, or any notification. You're literally dumping all your RAMs into your visualization space. And at that point, you're able to tweak and play around with ideas such as that. So doing this and then feeling it out from on, let's say, a prior experience that you've had, and then clearing it at the same time, or noticing these little nuances and traps of the mind at the same time, you're then able to apply it onto anything else. Because here's the thing, repetition is key. And this is where we dive back into the observer effect. Number 4, Repetition is key. Whatever repetition you do, just as said, you can repeat shooting yourself in the foot without necessarily knowing, lead yourself to that scenario, and you would have done it by your own hand, unknowingly. Okay? That's why when you understand the whole indirect aspect that we were indoctrinated, because we didn't fucking know anything about this technology from the get-go, and we didn't necessarily know how it would affect the subconscious overall. We didn't necessarily understand how games, movies, TVs, and that repetition, especially when it comes online, would affect the subconscious. Yet, once you understand the mind as a hard drive, you understand that the more you repeat that same process or fill the hard drive with the same file or the same kind of vibes, well, the more you're orienting yourself towards that direction, and that's what you will easily pick up on. As Tony Robbins says, the reticular activating system is honed in on what you've been focusing on for a while. So here's where it becomes very interesting, and that's why if you have time, look up the observer effect for quantum physics. Better explanation, or much more technical explanation that could get your brain to hone in on it. And there's other Eastern philosophies that have a different way of interpreting it. So I would recommend looking at that point of view as well. Whatever method you're able to kind of get your conscious mind to understand it helps you detach from it, or have it let loose a bit more, because it'll understand what it has done over the years. You'll understand the correlation of it, of the repetition that you may have done unawareingly or may have done being aware of it. And then from that point, as you're able to kind of see your own timeline, you're just able to change it, because you're like, oh, I want to repeat something else and go in a different direction. And I understand the momentum that has brought me to this point, so I can shift. Because it's all repetition, and that's your key. That's your game genie in a way. Understanding that it's all repetition. And it will tailor what you will see and encounter in your life. Literally. Because your brain will be honed in on those various things, including specific type of people attitude. If you're stuck watching TMZ or reality TV show, you will be more prone to finding unbalanced people. People that will just react and be stuck in the mind, because you've indirectly trained your brain to spot these people by re-looking at shows like that. Advertising these people on forefront. Now, one key thing, and still remaining in repetition, but one key thing is, do not let your brain go opposite. Meaning, when you notice the indoctrination from television and such, do not let your brain blame the actor and blame the media or the actors in the media. Do not let it do that, because that's a second pitfall that comes up. Because you don't necessarily, again, the feeling of separation will warn you, but let me tell you about that second pitfall. You forget that those people are just doing what they love. So it's not, the mind will go, okay, well, they did it on purpose. No. We didn't fucking know any of that stuff when it came to that technology. So you can't blame people that are doing things that they really like. Even if it does it indirectly, you can't blame them, because it'd be the same blame on yourself for doing something that you didn't know impacted others in a possible negative way. Some comment that you say online, never forget the ripples in time. Some comments that you might have said at one point might have impacted someone. Okay? But you didn't know what you didn't know, so you don't hold yourself to that. And the same kind of goes for those people on television, or those shows, or those networks. So do not let the brain get you in that second pitfall, because again, you'd be staying in an identity aspect of it, creating an opposition, which is why when it comes to activism, you're still stuck in the mind. Plus, you're creating your own enemy indirectly. As prior explained in the Black Lives Matter video, ripples in time, never forget the impact that you have, your wording, and also your lack, but also understanding of context, or your lack of context on another person, or understanding of context in the other person also impacts other people. It's, again, there's some complexity, but it becomes simple after a while with repetition. But you don't let your mind put you into that second trap. Okay? Crucial. It's something I noticed, and maybe you can kind of relate it to how in TV shows there's always an, you kind of see, oh, this person wasn't necessarily as nice as expected around the end of the season. So, aha, there was something behind that person. You always have these kind of twists of showing opposites, polar opposites. And they did try to have a gray area type of deal, but for entertainment, it's never well explained. And of course, it would take hours and hours to explain a person's psyche in that aspect. So when it comes to entertainment, even video games, it's quite easy to have like black and white, positive and negative, good and evil, really deep standard like that. But you don't want to let your mind work this way, because you'll generate the feeling of separation on yourself, for yourself in a way. Again, remembering it all comes down from within the mind. Plus, you generate that habit to be used on yourself as well. Casual thinking habits of going, okay, well then immediately you must be that. No, 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 no. Don't let the brain go that way. This is where you use non-duality to understand the context of time and what led to certain actions. Also, watch out when your brain uses that on yourself. Sometimes you'll go, oh, well, I don't necessarily have enough of that. But wait a second, 5 minutes ago or an hour ago, or in your notes, you said something completely opposite, which placed you in an universal understanding. So you can kind of notice sometimes when the mind has a perpetual habit of going that way. Again, lots of fine tuning, but hey, it's in the game. And now you can spot whenever the mind's like, oh no, maybe I'm not able to do that. No, you use it as a bouncing pad every time. You may even pause the video and go, bouncing pad. Okay, so how would it feel? What are the values? You literally confront the mind and going, okay, what's the value that you're setting up that you're not telling me to make me feel that feeling of separation? And then you'll get it. And then, all right, bounce back, bounced off. And doing that repetition literally frees you away from the identity of the mind. So you're no longer associated with the hard drive and all the perimeters it says that this is who I am. And whatever touches those perimeter, a piece of news, somebody saying something, somebody not using the right word or blah, 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 whatever touches those perimeter, you're not that. You're not that. You just move away from that. You understand it. Plus, you're not allowing it to put the blame on other, because you understand that they don't know what they don't know. And you also understand how deep that indoctrination kind of went to you and everyone else unknowingly, okay? How many people have televisions? How many people have internet, right? How many of those popular shows are people in the mind fighting or having conflicts with other people in the mind, So many. So that same understanding, that same forgiveness, and this is why it's the universal forgiveness. You give it to the other person, and at the same time, you don't let the mind generate it again. You repeat something else that will be applied onto you and others. Your focus and your attention will be on the much more positive habits, positive behaviors that you will integrate as well, because you're focusing on that when you're looking at other people in the world in general. So you're integrating it as you're watching it. Reticular activating system just picks it up, and you just start rolling that flow and that momentum. That's why one of the things I say, it's always repetition, and you never insult yourself. If you do something that you kind of miss the mark, because that's sinning. You miss the mark. It's not, ultimate death and you going to hell. No, that was mistranslation. These people were noobs. Let's just make fun of that for a bit. Not in a negative way, but it's kind of funny to see how many of the apostles kind of missed the mark when it came to the metaphors. And the same kind of goes for multiple religions. So you can kind of laugh at that, but you can miss the mark. It's not ultimate bad. This is not the end of the story. End of the season. You've missed all that. No, fuck that bullshit, Fuck that indoctrinated repetition. You just missed the mark. Guess what? Try it again. Focus on what you want. Ask the same question or ask another question. Refine your question to get a better answer. And you're going to see, you're going to go in tandem with oh, am I sparking up the feeling of separation? What's happening? Am I targeting someone or targeting myself in a specific way? Am I completely ignoring the context of forgiveness? Because when you completely ignore a person's context of the not knowing what you don't know at any point in time, then you reflect it back onto you. So you'll spot that and be like, okay, no, stop it. It becomes practice and habit. And you also watch out for the indoctrination pitfalls. So again, like I said, don't let the mind kind of go antagonistic over television media and all that. Just become aware and purposefully select what you look at. Whatever you're going to repeat in your mind as well. You now take on the controller and go, I will purposefully select what I will ingest, because you got to work with the hard drive. You can't just go, the ego is the enemy, so I hate the ego, I must become the soul. You can't. You got to play this like a team game. It's actually a triple team because your body counts into that, but I haven't necessarily studied enough to go into the properties in the very same way that I'm bringing this right now. This is something that I'm learning, and I'll bring it up whenever I want. So understand, you're playing a triple team game, but you always want to keep in mind that you're playing a massive co-op game. Mind, body, soul, but at the same time, everyone else. Because they reflect upon you what the mind reacts to. They literally reflect upon that. So it's not the other person, again, as said, it's not the other person that has the habit that you don't dislike. It's the perception from within that has a rule that says, I dislike this attitude, or this attitude is uncommon, or this attitude blah, 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 without even thinking about context of the other person. That aspect of rule sets from the hard drive, you pluck it off. You begin to disidentify from the hard drive, but you also become, and you also rewrite it. You also ascend it. And that becomes a game. Again, because if you say, okay, but I need to do this within a week, or I need to do this tonight, or I need to do this at this level, still the mind, still the perimeter in value. And as Einstein says, you cannot solve the problem with the same mind that created it. Indirectly created because you didn't choose the indoctrination. Nobody did. We didn't sign up for this, right? So again, non-duality becomes your best friend. And it's an amazing concept to kind of hone in and refine within yourself. Refine your understanding and your application of it. Because you don't keep yourself in that, boom, separation and absolutes. You are not limited. And this is where it kind of, you kind of just get a big wrap up of it. The mind limited with whatever it lived and whatever it gathered. So just like a hard drive, whatever websites you went on to, you get cookies, you get files, you get processes, as well as limitations. I am XYZ, so I can't do this, that, and that. Or I'm about to think about doing a plan, an idea, and you start the thought stream process. So let's say you start maybe 2 thought streams or ideas, thought streams, on a specific process. Well, then one of them may stop because I'm black, so I can't do that. Or I'm too poor, so I can't do that. Buddy, beeline to the end point feeling, And when it comes to the thought stream process, you can go 3, 4, 5. You'll manage it. You'll increase it. You'll become better at it as you practice this mindfulness while closing your eyes, putting all your rams into the thought streams, not getting distracted. So you're overclocking your visualization in a sense. And you're able to spot those little mind layers and nuances and then just clear them off. So cool trick is just basically think about your goals. You'll start your thought streams, your idea streams. You'll hit upon a point where the mind puts a limitation. You clear it off and you keep going. Or you might need to restart because at times it's kind of tricky to hold multiple thought streams at the same time while clearing things up. It's a practice. I might make a video, a more extended video on that with more tricks that I found recently. But you begin that, and ultimately as you beeline towards the end goal feeling from those thought streams or ideas, you merge them together in the perfection that you have found. because you're always thinking what feels better, what feels better, what feels better in rapport to that idea. And when you kind of hold a fortified thought stream, it becomes a party because you're always thinking about, okay, what's the best end result? What feels better about this? What feels better on that, in that specific method? You're going more and more and more. You literally tap into the flow state, but for your idea. That's why I say it kind of all blends together. But you're tapping into the flow state from those with your ideas, and you're spotting whatever kind of blocks it, what thoughts of limitation blocks it, and you literally power through and say, beeline to that endpoint feeling. And you'll see eventually you merge that perfection of idea, because you're always thinking about what feels better, and it's a temporary perfection because there's always another level. But to that point, you merge that perfection of idea into a one whole concrete idea. And then you might just either start that chain over again, start it with other things, or have multiple subjects in tandem, occurring in tandem. And then you just roll with this. But as you go along that process, you'll clear whatever limitation and you'll just play with this idea. And you'll also notice how unlimited your thoughts are when you're not in an aspect of, again, pointless past perceptions causing limitations. And you also balance it out, because there's certain things in your past that you want to keep, understand how it works, but not lay it as an absolute. Never laying it as an absolute. You always kind of bob and weave, just like with your craft. Bob and weave, find new techniques, new evolution of those techniques and processes and philosophies, because naturally as you do it, even if you picked from a tutorial, your natural interpretation and flow inevitably creates something new. It's always new. So there's no point in remaining in a lock-the-box idea of the mind of, oh, this process, this one thing. No, you create something new inevitably. So just go for broke, have fun. Gauge your extremities and your extremes, and then scale back. Play with both extremities, because you can do it in the mind. Just visualize it and kind of go, okay, that extremity, how do I feel about it? Oh, not as bad as I thought, and I don't cause any kind of feeling of separation, whether it be on myself or thinking about another. So, okay, I can play with that extremity for a bit. And then guess what? It'll look like an extremity for now, but you'll always find another level. So that's how you kind of basically just expand out of your thought ideas. You understand the limitations of it, and you just kind of jump off that, But you also play in tandem to help the mind free itself from this limitation, because you also need this autopilot. That's how the indoctrination's been working, not in your favor, but now you're actually putting this in your favor. So you're setting up your own autopilot in the things that you actually want to perceive and conceive in your life. And just like sleep tapes, you're doing your own repetition. Just like affirmations, it's all this aspect of repetition. So it becomes natural after a while. Just like that process. Explaining all of this may have taken 48 minutes, but upon you playing with this and doing that repetition a couple of times and finding your own techniques, in your mind, like I said, thought speed is beyond a microsecond and gets faster as you practice. In your mind, this is going to be easy. It already is. You can ask yourself that question. How easy would it be? And you're starting to get the thought stream leading to making it easier. So, crashing down the identity, in a way, okay? But it's much more of turning it as your ally in a co-op game, but not being latched onto it, not being stuck to it, not being tied to it. Allowing yourself to just go various distances, and not being tied to the mind and identity. And that's how you don't get plucked off, or that's how your focus and attention doesn't get plucked off by any kind of news, feedback, any little comments or drama that's happening. Because, again, indoctrinated to pay attention to that. When you realize that your focus is key to your life, as it repeats what is going to come back to you, then you start going, oh, okay, so you might as well just keep your focus centered on what you want to perceive and create in your life for yourself and others, not the bullshit drama that's happening. You understand why it's happening, because not being, the indoctrination and not knowing what you don't know, being stuck in the mind, that's a toxic combination. You've seen people just fuck it, go back through history and watch people just gunning themselves down for opinions on the newspaper, or go back even further when people would just wage war with each other or cities based off, oh, you did not marry my daughter, that kind of stuff. It's kind of funny when you look at it now, but it's like, yeah, you're facing the same kind of habit on a lower scale. Of course, people not literally just going at war, but Twitter beef, YouTube beef, Facebook beef, that. And when I say beef, conflict, drama, that kind of stuff, and then people getting hurt for that. Mind, identity. How dare you say that about this this thing I'm associating it to so tightly that I feel it is my life. You see, you kind of see it now and you laugh at it, but there's still a lot of people stuck in it, and you understand it, so you let it go. You let it go. You faced that before, so with practice it just becomes easy, faster, easier, and that's how you kind of, one of the multiple ways to break away from the identity. Now, there's more. Please do your research. There is more. Because if this didn't necessarily kind of do it for you, then there's more. There's literally more out there. There's multiple ways, multiple methods, multiple ways of phrasing it, multiple interpretations that can literally help you get this. And I personally understood most of this by going through quantum physics, philosophy, religion, various kinds of practices and techniques, which kind of helped me piece up together this little Babel's tower that we were kind of going along. Because ultimately our religions kind of lead you to that point when they don't mess with the metaphors. When it's not institutionalized and they kind of mess with the metaphor, completely missing the mark of what was told. Maybe a video on that would be really fun to do. And you can kind of see people reacting, overly devoted, reacting, yet completely missing the metaphors that were told, which would lead them not to react. We can make a video on that, but hey, if anything, look at various other methods, look at various other techniques, find what works with you. But at the end of the day, it's your own repetition over and over and over that leads you to the point that where you want to be at. So you get all these in tandem, or you understand all these in tandem, especially separating from the mind, understanding you didn't have that hard drive wasn't filled up when you were born, so you always have a point to your initial original state. The rest is balance, and that's always fine-tuning. So have some fun, play with this, find more methods that work with you, create your own method. Again, play with your visualization, create the things that kind of work with you, your own attitude, your own habits, your own preferences, and just enjoy. Because at the end of after it all, it's just enjoying life afterward. Because you purposely set your projector, your memory, your hard drive on focusing on what you love and what's fun. So GG, game's done, Even one repetition is already you lifting your hands and going win. Because you're starting the repetition in that other point in perspective. You're starting your conscious repetition. So it's naturally going to take momentum. That's why I say you don't need to have it to do it at a specific point. That would be mind putting rule sets and layers. You can play with this. Ask yourself those cheat code questions and just have a ball. Have fun. And then the world just looks interesting. You're no longer snagged onto whatever drama happens. You understand and you're like, oh, okay, cool. What's fun? What's great? What's interesting? How can I help more people? Kind of like these videos. You find your own ways to help others in a fun way, playful way, not needing way. All right, man. Get that fine-tuning going and play. Just non-stop play.